All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to AZAPO's online political education series. And today I'm playing host to two stalwarts of our Black consciousness movement, Comrade Mathatha Tsedu, a veteran of our liberation struggle. I also have Tsedu Mangena on the line. So today we will be talking about the experiences of solitary confinement as a lockdown, as well as lockdown. Comrade Mathatha Tsedu is a veteran of our struggle, and he has spent many months on solitary confinement, and along with a number of our stalwarts of struggle, and Tsedu Mangena also spent some time in solitary confinement, and in the last 6 months or so, we have been exposed to some form of confinement through the coronavirus lockdown. And today we are spending time with these two stalwarts of our movement just to tease them a bit about their own experiences and how, do they see what is happening now during this lockdown, and how does it compare to the confinement that they experienced during the period of liberation struggle. Welcome, and Mathatha Tsedu, and welcome, Tsedu Mangena. So first, we will be engaging with Tsedu Tsedu and talking about what he felt, what he saw, and how he experienced solitary confinement during his incarceration, during his days of liberation struggle. And he has written quite a lot about this experience as a veteran journalist. And Mangena will then talk to us about the present circumstances in terms of how do they compare to what he experienced during those days of solitary confinement. Welcome, Towers. Okay, we have just lost a connection there to Comrade Tsedu. Let's quickly sort out our tech issues, and then we should be good to go.
Yeah.
Okay, you're back.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And as I indicated, I am here with Comrade Mathatha Tsedu, a veteran journalist and stalwart of the Black Consciousness Movement. And he is here to talk to us about his experience of, the times of solitary confinement during the period of our liberation struggle. And later on, I will be engaging with Mosibudi Mangena, who will be talking to us about the comparisons that he sees when he looks at what is happening now with the last 6 months or so of coronavirus lockdown, and how does it compare to what they experienced during the time of liberation struggle, as they both experienced solitary confinement in those apartheid cells. Welcome, Comrade Mathatha Tsedu.
Thank you.
The first session will be with Comrade Mathatha Tsedu, so I will just give him, some time just to share his perspective and experiences with us, and then later on we will engage with Tsedu Mangena. Comrade Mathatha, the floor is yours.
No, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. Solitary confinement, by definition, means you are alone, not by choice, but through confinement or someone else's decision. In that condition of confinement, you are lonely. When you are alone by your own volition, it is called solitude. Wikipedia makes the following distinction between these two conditions, and I quote, "There's a big difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness is a negative force marked by a sense of isolation. One feels that something is missing. Solitude is the state of being alone without being lonely. It is a positive and constructive state of engagement with oneself, close quote. So when we speak about solitary confinement, we are talking about a negative force. And here in our country, we would be talking about a period of heightened oppression and suppression when mainly Black people were detained and tortured, either to extract a self-incriminating statement to be used for prosecution of yourself or your comrades, or to be simply taken away and locked for months on end without the system, because the system found you a nuisance outside jail. Section 6 of the Suppression of Communism Act and later various sections of the Internal Security Act were used to keep detainees in jail for long periods without the need to be charged or even to be seen by a lawyer. You are deprived of information. Sometimes you would be banned and prohibited from leaving, firstly, the magisterial district totally without a permit. And secondly, then the premises you are restricted to, you would not be allowed to leave between certain hours over weekends and public holidays. And at the same time, you would be barred from receiving visitors at those premises. So if you were single, like Comrade Mangena was in the beginning, that meant for those periods, you were in solitary confinement, even if you were not in jail proper. In my case, when I was banned, my wife and kids were further north from where I was, where she was working. So effectively, evenings from 7, all weekends and public holidays were solitary jail time. The key to surviving solitary confinement for me, whether in jail or under banning intent of the was, which was understanding that was the first step towards survival, because whether it was detention or a banning order, your life changed. You could no longer do things you used to do. I was just about 30 years old and in the prime of my life, and for the first time, I was enjoying my work. I went to meetings of my union, Mwasa. I attended political gatherings, whether to report or to participate or both. I traveled around the region and around the country a lot, covering political court cases or uncovering farm atrocities against Black workers. And in one swell swoop, all that came to a screeching halt one day. I could no longer leave Seshego. It rattles your system, and you need to be strong and understand the rules of the game if you are to survive. And that rule is you must survive by being strong. Strength comes from a mind that is not idle, but a mind at work. So one had to find things to do. We had an informal training club in Seshego, for example, with Thabo Montane, Pet Kobela, and Brasol Rapalarani. And at around 5 each morning during the week, we would hit the road and get to the Blood River Bridge and do our stretch training there. The day for me had started positively every weekday. You had lots of time on your hands, so you have to find things to do. I read a lot. I also spent a lot of time at a scrap yard owned by a man we knew as Smogo in Seshego. It was just opposite the Seshego hostel. I became an expert on repairing the VW Beetle and owned quite a few that I bought at government auctions that were, in terms of the law, I was not even supposed to attend, but I would defy and go. And later on, we created a sub-office of the Northern Transvaal Advice Office in Seshego, where I worked with Ru and dealt with labor and other issues. Our primary aim for anyone we assisted was to show them how they were where they were because they were not members of a trade union. Virtually all the people we assisted joined unions afterwards. We had one room at the Podisha Dichaba Lutheran Center provided by Reverend Cherry. And to create an illusion of two offices, we subdivided it with flimsy wood partition that did not even reach the ceiling. We created a door between my office and Tabo's office that was closed with a curtain. Technically, Tabo was in another office and I was in another. And that way we could service our clients. Without that partition, we could not have worked, as I could not be with more than one person at a time. The police raided us frequently, but technically we were in two offices. We were fighting back against the psychological onslaught against us. In order to deal with this psychological warfare, I took my then 3-year-old daughter, Mope, from her mother, and she lived with me full time. During the day, I dropped her at a crèche. So overnight, this little girl developed many grown-up friends who came to visit her at home. They were her guests and not mine. There was no law that said older people couldn't be friends with a 3-year-old. You had to beat the system at its own game. When I was detained in Morningside police cells with a number of PAC and applicators in 1982 and tortured horribly in Krugersdorp, to beat the system, we created a communication system that used the toilet for what we would today call end-to-end encrypted messages. When we were transferred to Groenpunt prison in the Free State, we used the sewage system of the prison to send letters home, with prisoners manning the sewer plant warned to look out for plastics with our letters, which they would organize envelopes and stamps with those who were prisoners who were going outside to work. The people at home, we felt, just needed aid, even if there was no return address. When I was moved to Vanderbilt Park police cells, I organized a pen and a jigsaw puzzle of about 2,500 pieces, which I spent a lot of time working on. The picture of this jigsaw puzzle included clouds at the top. And everyone or anyone who has done real jigsaw, not the 10 and 15 and 20 pieces, but the real thing, will tell you clouds are a menace because that area just looks the same. But it meant I spent a lot of time occupied. I organized the pen and used the box of the jigsaw to do some mathematics work on my family's names. For example, that meant creating a universal set with all our names, mine, my wife, my son Mpo, my daughter Mo, and then the subsets and how each of these names intersected with all others in the letters of the names. And then I worked out stuff like how many letters we all shared, how many I shared with my wife, how many I shared with my son, how many with my daughter, and what were the letters that were not shared by anyone at all. It sounds like a lot of nonsense, but it kept me going. When I was released, I kept that piece of paper, and recently I was trying to locate it, but couldn't. It felt like I had lost a big part of my experience. In the Bidiela police cells, during the state of emergency in 1986. I sang every night, freedom songs, from freedom songs to Dobby Gray's Loving Arms. I can do it even now. And to sign off each night, I would sing, Sengiyolala ngingedwa ethuneni lami. The key thing was to develop a routine that kept the mind busy. For example, in Vanderbijl, I would run around the cell yard for an hour every day. And because I lived in that cell for 6 full months, by the time I left, there was a well-worn out path of my route. I had decided that I was not going to be broken. I knew I had to survive, and that meant turning the negative loneliness of confinement into some form of positive solitude. When the lockdown stage 5 came, I opted to lock down at our farm outside Makado. I found myself going back to some of the routines, like walking about 2 kilometers each morning on the farm. But I had chosen the farm because it is a functional place, and as such, the restrictions were not for us that severe, as we had many hectares to walk around and work. I suspect if I had locked down in Joburg, I would have reactivated all my survival techniques because of the space. Thank you.
Oh, well, thanks, Comrade Mathatha. That was, some experience indeed. It is not something that people would be able to survive easily, and it would be interesting to hear what Tate Mangena has to say about that which you just narrated compared to what we are seeing today. And I'm sure all of those came in very handy. Those techniques and tactics came in very handy to survive in this lockdown. And the beauty about the previous lockdown was that it was something that was forced upon you, and you took the decision to resist it. And now this time, the lockdown is something that we all need for us to be able to survive. Tate Mangena, what do you have to tell us?
Oh, well, a lot of it dovetails with what Mathatha has just shared with us. With me, it starts with a detention at a Warmer police station in the Eastern Cape under Section 6 of the Terrorism Act. And that's really, it tortures your body more than, your mind more than it tortures your body. And you feel as if it would be better if the Boers would come and talk to you, interrogate you, or beat you up or something. Because being alone in a single cell, sometimes you feel as if you could go mad. And I used to sing, as Mathatha was saying, and dance, the popular tunes of the time, dance alone. And I'll listen to common law prisoners in neighboring cells singing and beating one another up and so on, because that's what they did most of the time. And at some point, I had a black policeman, because it was only the white guys who were the white policemen who used to come into that cell where I was detained alone for about 3 months. I asked him for something to read. He resisted for a while. And then one day he brought me a magazine called Living and Loving. It was about something like probably 3 to 6 months old. But to me, it was quite a companion, It talks mainly about beauty, about women's underwear, about rearing children, how to look after children, babies, and things like that. I read it from cover to cover many times over. This policeman had asked me that once I'm done with it, I should destroy it and flush it down the toilet, but I couldn't. I kept it under the blankets, the dirty blankets that I used to sleep on for quite a number of days until I thought maybe I'll bring him into some trouble, and then I destroyed it. But it is that kind of thing that, you know, anything that can keep your mind going would be very useful. Then, of course, solitary confinement ended when I was eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison on Robben Island. But the entire journey from Grahamstown to Port Elizabeth prison for a number, where I spent a few days, to Pretoria, where I was again kept in solitary confinement, and then to Leeuwkop, where I then met some other freedom fighters from the ANC, Cholo and others, and who were in the same cell. And then, of course, transported to Robben Island, where then, you know, you could meet with the other prisoners and discuss lots of stuff, debate political issues and so on. But then when I was about to be released in 1978, say 6 weeks or so, I was removed from Robben Island prison to Portsmouth prison, together with other political prisoners who were just about to be released. But at Portsmouth prison, we were put in single cells, solitary confinement, where we spent a few days. Then they moved us to Port Elizabeth prison, where we were again put in single cells, and we spent a number of days there. Even though the other political prisoners who were with me were put in more or less the same areas, and when we had exercise, we would do that together. But we were kept away from common law prisoners who were, you know, prohibited meeting with us or even seeing us. And then a few days at Port Elizabeth prison, we were taken to East London prison. I think it's called Fort Glamorgan or something. And as we go, those who were supposed to be released in PE were released there. And those who were supposed to be released in East London, they were released there. And then they moved us to Bloemfontein prison. And once again, solitary confinement for a few days. And then they moved me to Pretoria prison. By the time they moved me there, I was alone. Again in solitary confinement for a few days. Then they moved me to Leeuwkop prison. And because I was on my way out, I was again put in a single cell in solitary confinement. Then a few days before I was supposed to be removed, to be released, they drove me to Polokwane prison. It was Petersburg prison then, where I was again detained in solitary confinement. And on the day on which I was supposed to be released, from my understanding, this was the 3rd of October, 1978. My understanding was that I would be released in the morning, but I wasn't. And by about 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon, I was doing, you know. I was telling them that, you know, hitting the bars with whatever I could find. And when the warders came, I said, I've finished my sentence and I want to be removed, to be released now. And they said, no, chill, you will be released. And that didn't happen. 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening, somebody came and they unlocked the single cell and I got out. And this time, no tying of my hands or anything. I was just with one guy, an Afrikaner guy. And we got into a car, they signed the release forms. Out of Petersburg prison, we drove south. That I could tell that we were driving south. And I asked this guy, hey, where are we going? And he said, no, you will see. And then we got to Potgietersrus. And this guy drove to a police station. I said, hey, why are you taking me to a police station? I'm supposed to be free now. I'm not supposed to be in your custody today. He said, no, you chill. You will see. And I got into the police station. They didn't put me in any solitary confinement. I was just sitting there in the at the reception of the police station. We waited and waited. Sometime they took me to some room, and just as they were driving me to that other room, I could hear a car stopping at high speed outside. And a guy came out in a suit, and he had an envelope in his hand, and he read the banning orders to me, which said that from that day onward, Jimmy Kruger was banning and restricting me to Makulering Township, and read all the provisions. And when he had finished, he asked me to sign. And then a certain policeman, Marek Mafafu, asked me to go with him in his van. I was sitting in front. For the first time, I was sitting next to him. And as we drove, he asked me, they gave me 150 rands. They said this is to tide me up, to keep me alive. And so with Mafafu asked me what I would like to get. So I said, no, I'd like to buy fruit. Because you know, on Robben Island, we're not allowed to have fruit. For all those years that we were there, no fruit. And so I bought, I stopped at a cafe. I bought apples, oranges, peaches, bananas, everything, you know, and some cold drink. And then he drove me to Makulering. I had asked him, where's Makulering? He said, no, wait, it's not far. We will get there very soon. And so we got there. He stopped in front of this two-roomed house, which was like a matchbox that had been sewn, the back part thrown out, but it was sealed at the back, so it had only one door. And the guy had not, there was no light, it was not electrified. I said, well, how am I supposed to exist in a place like this? Because it was already dark now. And am I supposed to sit in the dark? So he quickly drove out to the shops and he brought 2 candles or something. And so he lit them. I was able to look inside the two-room house, which was painted black, you know, and there were no curtains to cover the windows. I said, no, but well, how am I supposed to sleep in a place like this where there are no curtains? He said, no, I can't do anything about that. I said, no, you must go and tell your bosses that I've got to have curtains. He said that tomorrow. So I had to get newspapers and put them over the windows, and then got out. I could see both sides of the house. There were some people. So I had not seen ordinary people, ordinary families in the 5 years or so that I was in prison. So I greeted them. and they had been told that a bandit was coming and that they should stay very far away from me, but particularly they must keep the children away from me because they don't want the children to be contaminated by this bandit who will be unleashed or released in their neighborhood. But in the next door neighbor who I talked to, Mr. Ledwaba, who turned out to be the nearest friend that we would have. He asked me whether I had food, and I didn't have any food. So his wife dished out, and they asked me to come over. I said, but I can't come over because every day from 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning, I'm supposed to be house arrested. I can't leave the yard. And I can only leave the yard in the next morning. But even then, I could only be with one person at a time, as Mathatha has just explained. I couldn't leave the Mukerong magisterial district. I couldn't work. I couldn't write anything for publication, and so forth. So his wife dished, and they put the food next to the fence. And I sit in my yard, and Mr. Ledwaba sat in his yard, and we shared a meal. In 5 years, it was the first time I shared a meal with somebody else. And as Mathatha indicated, I was single then, at 31 years old. I wasn't married, but I had a girlfriend in Johannesburg. And we communicated, and when she came, the Ledwaba family hosted her. And we could only sit because we were not married. She was not allowed to come into my yard. And so they hosted her. She will put up with them and bring me all the goodies, whatever she had. And we will sit and talk across the fence until we got married. Mathatha was a witness at my wedding. He had come earlier to do a story on this thing, that there is a guy who has been banned and restricted to Mahwelereng. The story, I think, was for the Post newspaper. And so quite a lot of people who have read that came to know, and they would come around and just stare at this guy or just go past. But the neighbors on Saturdays, and especially on Sundays when they had cooked, they would dish for me as well, you know, because I was this army guy who was staying alone, single. He was not working, didn't have food, but I was afraid. At the same time, I was afraid of poisoning. I didn't know to what extent these people really wanted to help. But the Ledwaba family, really, I did eat their food without any hesitation. But after I got married, Mathatha was able to come in and celebrate the wedding with us, together with 2 others. So at our wedding, we had only 3 guests, and Mathatha was one of them. Yeah, but we did try and beat the system. There was no political activity in Mahwelereng at all when I got there. So I was something of a novelty, especially for young people. And they started being drawn to me. And we talked a lot of politics. They were going to, most of them were from Gojela High School. And they would come and stand outside, and I would talk to them outside the yard. Then I would talk to them. Even if it was weekend, when I was house arrested from 6 o'clock in the evening on Friday until Monday morning at 6 o'clock. but they would come, even if they don't stand in the street, they would go to the neighbors. The children's neighbors also got involved in politics. They were very curious. They wanted to know what is going on politically. Why am I there? And why is the system treating me like this? If the system had thought that by doing this, it was alienating us from the people, and that it was isolating us from our base, they were in fact spreading political activity. And as a result of this, those young people from Gojela High School, all of them became involved in the in AZAPO. The only person who was older was Mushitwana Mulala, that is Mkosi Mulala's older brother, who was working for his brother who had a hotel in Makulere. And every now and then during the day, of course, amongst other places, I'll go to the hotel to go and phone, to Johannesburg and everywhere else, to be in contact with people or other political activists. And so my presence there brought about political activity in Makulere. And many of those young Mathatha, Hunadi Mujapelo, and others became the seed that eventually established a branch of AZAPO there. And when people like Semi Tlovatla and the late Letsatsi Mosala came and inaugurated the branch, and political activity started. And then, of course, my girlfriend then asked that I should, she thought I looked gaunt and sickly and so on, and said insisted that I should go and see a doctor. And I asked around who was the doctor there, and it turned out to be Tlhatla. I went to see him, and I had remembered him. You know, Tlhatla had such distinctive features, very light in complexion, and the kind of features that he had were really unique. So I remembered him as an actor in a play during his days at the University of Natal. They had come to the University of Zululand where I had studied. So I asked whether he was the same guy. Yeah, he said he was the same guy, and he was a Black consciousness guy. And so we became friends and comrades. And in addition to he looking after my health free of charge, he also offered me a job at his surgery in order to take me away from the loneliness of that two-roomed house. So this became very easy then for the students and others to come and see me there, and we discuss politics and so on. And he would also offer his vehicles so that I could, on many occasions, I would drive to Zanini to go and see Mampela, who was banned and restricted to Lenyanya Township at night. And the children of my neighbors would come and lock up, you know, leave after dark, and I will light the candle so that it would appear as though there is somebody inside. And say after 9 o'clock or something, they would come and blow out the candle and lock the door. So that when I come back in the small hours of the morning, I'm able to get in. Similarly, I would go to Soweto for meetings under those burning orders. Even with Mampela, we traveled together at one time to Soweto. And at one time when my child was born, Comrade Tlhatla gave me an ambulance to drive to Soweto to go and see my firstborn, and told me how to operate it, and the lamp that if I see a roadblock, I should just put on that thing and the light, you know, the red light, so that it will get these guys to believe that an ambulance was on a mission. Well, so that was what it was. But we were very committed. We didn't mind this at all. We were focusing on a cause. Lockdown, when it came, was pop and place, you know. But also it is like friendly fire, you know. It was done in the interest of all of us. It was like benevolent oppression. Just that we couldn't now leave our house unless it was necessary. I'm married now, I've got children, and so we can be in touch. You can phone around. We can even do a Zoom with the children if they are in Gauteng and so on, to get in touch with their friends, unlike the situation under the banning orders where you could not be in contact with anybody. You can get newspapers here to read. You can watch television. You listen to the radio and the news. Unlike what you had in solitary confinement, where you couldn't do those things. Well, here too, you were prohibited from having meetings. But everybody understood why we couldn't have a meeting. We understood that it was for our own good of the country and our families and so on. We couldn't buy alcohol, but who cares? You know, you couldn't buy tobacco, but who cares? We could get in touch with other people and life continued more or less normally. So emotionally, the lockdown was not as taxing as the solitary confinement. It was not dangerous either. Nobody was attacking you. Nobody wanted to get information out of you through torture. So this was really different. So with the lockdown, it was the entire country that was under Section 6. A relaxed one, and so it was pop and place for those of us who have gone through the real Section 6 and solitary confinement or banning orders and house arrests.
Wow. This is really, I'm processing all of this experience and this feedback, and I'm like saying, wow. This must have been very difficult to survive, and yet you were at the time, you know, activists and people who had, you know, devoted your lives to struggle, devoted, you know, your lives to liberating people. And you knew what you were getting yourselves into because, you know, you had been trained in Black consciousness, which really focused, you know, much of its time at the time on, you know, psychological liberation. So in a sense, you had prepared yourselves for, you know, anything that could happen to yourselves. I wonder now, when you look at what is happening in the country, you know, 26 years post, you know, the first democratic election, is it the kind of sacrifice that you would say it was worth it? You know, having gone through all of the experiences that you endured during, you know, that time of struggle, that time of confinement. And I'm also listening to the kind of things that you did to beat the system, and looking at what people are doing now to beat the system of lockdown, just to accumulate cigarettes, alcohol, and all of those kinds of things that they they need for them to survive. You know, there are two experiences, you know, through engagement with people that, you know, have been subjected to this. One was a comrade who had spent many years in prison. And when he came out, one of the things that he said was that it was not possible for him to be in the same space with a group of people, more than 3, 4, or 5 people, because he just felt awkward in that space, because you are so used to, you know, being confined in a space where there is 1 or 2 individuals. And now he has to, now that he has been, you know, been freed and allowed to mingle with other people, he was afraid to be in the same space with a number of people in a party or in an environment where there's, you know, a lot of people. So it must have been very difficult to be integrated back into society and be able to live with people and do the normal things that, you know, free people are able to do. That is just one experience of a person who, you know, had experienced the kind of experiences that you endured. And then during this present lockdown, you have an individual who stays alone at her property, and you know, spends much of her time at work with other people and enjoys that time, and only goes home, you know, because, you know, she's a young person, she only goes home to sleep, or spends as little time as possible in that house. And now being subjected to, you know, confinement of sorts, you know, so as to save her life and prevent her, you know, being infected by the coronavirus. And she had to be hospitalized because that was a new experience to her, an experience that, you know, she was not ready for, and ended up calling people and saying, well, I can't survive this environment. It got into her psychological makeup in a very big way. I don't know how you think, what your comments are on these experiences. Comrade Mathatha?
The impact of banning orders and even detentions with solitary living alone in a cell and all of that has a lasting effect on people. So you develop a liking to be alone in a way. Because you are comfortable with your thoughts and everything else. You yearn for company, but when it is not there, it's not as if it's a train smash. You can live like that. I see it. I'm like I was saying earlier, I'm on a farm. It's just me and 3 guys here who assist on the farm. My wife comes and goes. But I'm fine. I haven't been to Joburg since February. So my ability to stay here in a very large way is also due to the fact that I was able to stay alone, but not lonely.
Yes.
So it's like I was saying earlier on, it's quite important to actually work it into your psyche so that the experience is positive and not negative. So the sister that you're talking about had dealt with her solitude as a loneliness, and and she crashed. Yeah.
Dr. Mangena? I see you nodding.
That situation affects people differently. And there are certain things that do not leave you, that continue to be part of your life, probably until the grave. I've got a tendency not to close doors. You know, simply because I think when you are in detention and in prison, people open and close doors for you.
Mm.
You know,
So you think you're still in jail?
and I've been trying to be conscious, and that I must. So because other people remonstrate with you, why don't you close? You know?
So you're expecting somebody to be forcing you.
Must open the door and close it for me. But when I go out, I'll open the door, and then, but for some reason, when I come in, I don't close the doors.
Mm.
Why don't you close the doors? I forgot it. But I know that it is part of some of the things that stay with you because of. But you are also conscious, you know, with this thing, for example, my son who deals with this COVID thing sat me and his mother down and said that because COVID-19 loves people who are over 65, you people must stay home, you know, only when it's necessary, and, you know, give us a lecture on how we must behave, you know, because this thing, then, and he himself does not come home anymore. And if he comes, he stands outside, you know, and so insist not to visit us because we are this people who are susceptible to the illness and so on. But because of awareness of what it means to be alone so much, we have, at my suggestion, that we should meet at least once a week, you know, on all of us as a family.
As a family.
Check on one another, check how we are doing psychologically, and so on. And as to whether this was worth it, that is what we went through in the struggle for freedom, it was worth every effort, every pain that we suffered. It was worthwhile. The thing is that we should be free to do whatever we like, to mess up this country or not to mess, not telling us what is right and what is wrong, what we can do and what we cannot, what we can do and what we cannot do. We would like to do this ourselves, much as we're angry with what our compatriots are doing, but we do not regret the fact that the country is now free and our people are free to mess up. So we should like one another, but we should never regret the fact that we fought for freedom.
And how easy was it to recommit yourselves to, you know, to struggle after, you know, getting out of jail, or you just saw it as a phase, as part of struggle that you know, we can't divorce this being confined to this one room, or what is it, 1.2 square meter area. So you saw it as part of struggle, and therefore it was not a question of recommitting, but a question of continuing with where you left off, you know, with struggle. Because I mean, some of you, whilst you were confined in those, you know, houses through banning order, you continued to break the law and, you know, continued with the program of liberation. So how easy was it, or was it just a question of determination that, you know, we see it as a detour in the journey towards, you know, liberation of our people, or did you see it as, you know, the pain, you know, that should not be endured by people?
For me, my whole approach was that South Africa, for us as Black people, was just one large prison. And the difference between me, when I was in Seshego under a banning order, was the length of chain that I carried. It was shorter than other people who could walk around even over weekends. And when I was taken even out of that banning order into a cell, for me, it was just the shortening of the chain. The struggle was always about removing the chain. So when you come out, the chain is still there. The struggle to remove that chain had to go on. There was no need to even have some kind of internal debate within yourself about, so manje ke. No, there wasn't anything like that.
No, that's good to hear, because you know what we see now with this coronavirus lockdown is, you know, people. One individual was saying to me the other day that he was forced by his, you know, there's a difference between you as patriots who committed yourselves to struggle and people being forced into, you know, house confinement because of the virus that they don't even understand. Because if you go to some of the areas in the townships, you know, they don't even understand this thing, and they feel, you know, confined in the space, and they can't even move because of, you know, the size of the houses in the communities where they live. It really affected, you know, them to a point where they had to find other things to do. One guy was saying to me that he was asked by his wife to transcribe the Bible, you know, and look at, you know, he's never read the Bible because he doesn't care about going to church, but he had nothing to do. And for him to survive, he had to, you know, transcribe the Bible for his wife, you know, just to kill time and just to make sure that he doesn't break down psychologically. So, you know, it is much easier for you, Comrade Mathatha, in your farm, and Tsedu Mangena understands, you know, the situation in which we are. And yet, if you go to our communities in the townships, a lot of our people do not understand why we have to be subjected to this lockdown. And it was very, very tough for a lot of people to have been able to survive this far. So the experience of many of our people, more so when they don't understand and when they are not committed to the cause, becomes a different ball game altogether. And which is why you see a lot of negative action of people breaking this thing, because you know, it's not about health of the people or the liberation of the people, but it's about I need cigarettes, I need alcohol, I can't survive this thing. So it's different experiences for our people than what you see and what you are saying right now. I don't know what your views are with regard to what we see out there.
Well, you know, people are not the same. Even under, say, detention, people took it differently. There are people who were able to endure solitary confinement better than others. And on Robben Island, for example, one of our biggest weapons that we used against the system when we were unhappy, when we were aggrieved by something, was to go on hunger strike. There are people who just after just one day, they can't take it. You know, one day of not eating, they can't take it. And there are people who can take it, say 3 or 4 days. After 4 days, they can't take it anymore. But there are people who are like Bobby Sen, who can take it until death. So there is people react differently to different situations. But one of the most important things, especially with the kind of lockdown that we have, which is, well, it's not that bad, is to find something to do, something to kill the time. For example, one of the things that I decided to do was to write more. So I wrote a manuscript during this lockdown period. It brings about a lot more discipline. I had nothing to do. Mathatha, cattle and goats, and and stuff like that to deal with. So he devoted his energies and time, and he could go out on walks on the farm. You can't go out on walks in the suburb here under lockdown level 5 because that was not allowed. So you can walk in your yard, then go back to the desk and write something. So other people were watching TV more than ever before, or gymming in their own yards and so on. But you've got to try and find something, not dwell on the negative side of the lockdown. Especially if you know that it is supposed to be something we do for our own benefit, for our own good, and for the good of the nation. So it's something that is easy to enjoy, especially, as I said, there are newspapers, there is television, there is radio, there are family members. So you ought to be able to survive this better than who were able to. In any case, they did it something like a few months at a time, whereas confinement or banning orders were for 5 years, not 3 months.
5 years is a very long time. I can't believe that an hour is already gone. I'm really enjoying the conversation, but we'll have to end it at some point. I don't know what Comrade Mathatha you want to say as a closing comment in terms of the importance of patriotism, because all of this you went through because you were patriots, and we are in this lockdown because we need to be patriotic to ourselves and to our nation, and make sure that we continue to live as a society, and prevent people from the ills of the pandemic. And a lot of us have looked up to your good selves as an example of commitment to resolve, commitment to a struggle, and have benefited a lot from the knowledge and the experience that you've shared over the years. And it's always great to listen to your experiences and what you went through. And any last comments from your side?
No, I would say that the COVID is it's a problem today. We have the whole country to build and even to rescue before we even build it. So the commitment to doing right has to be the guiding force at all times. We must survive COVID in order for us to rescue the country and rebuild it. If you're going to go reckless and die because of something that you could have avoided, that's like treason, because you are now robbing the struggle to rescue the country and rebuild it.
Okay. We seem to have lost connectivity there. Comrade Mathatha? Okay, we have lost him. He's in a farm, and you should expect those kind of tech problems. Comrade Mangena, any closing comments from your side?
I think COVID it's a very serious matter that affects the lives of all our citizens. And, in addition to we doing all we can to survive so that we can rebuild this country, we need to think of our compatriots. Whatever we do, think of the next person, that you've got to protect your family, protect your friends, protect your compatriots, so that we can all conquer, survive this pandemic so that our nation can go forward. And none of us should allow himself or herself to be selfish, to think about himself or herself only, but to think about the entire country, that we are each other's brother, each other's sister's keeper, and therefore behave in a manner that assists us in defeating this health pandemic.
Thank you very much to Comrade Mosibudi Mangena and Comrade Mathatha Tsedu for agreeing to spend the afternoon with us. And we look forward to engaging with you again next Saturday when we spend the afternoon with Comrade Ibrahim Fakir. And thank you very much for spending the time with us. Let's connect again next weekend. Thank you, and bye-bye, everybody.